Hi, Year Fives, and welcome to today's science session. And in this session, we are going to be reviewing properties and materials. And in particular, you're going to be looking at revising the vocabulary that you can use to describe the various properties of different materials. So we're going to be looking at materials that have different uses depending on their properties and looking at vocabulary such as the following. So this is the sort of words that you could use when you are describing the properties of materials. So materials are the uh, the the things that objects are made out of. So, for example, you could have wood, you could have stone, you could have glass, you could have metal. So, it's the substance, if you like, that objects are made out of. Um, and you can describe them in this way. So, something which is opaque is something that you cannot see through. Translucent is something which you can just about see through. So, perhaps sort of like a plastic umbrella there that's a little bit cloudy. So, you can see through it, but not very clearly. Transparent is where you can see something very clearly. Flexible is something that you can move around quite easily. Rigid is something which cannot be bent out of shape very easily, such as a pencil. If you tried to bend it into shape, it would snap, wouldn't it? So it's not flexible. That would be rigid. Absorbent is something like a sponge. It's able to take in a lot of water. And then you've got this word here, brittle, which describes things such as glass. So a glass is hard, but it is easily broken. So brittle describes an object or material rather, which is hard but is easily broken, such as glass. And then you've also got these words here are conductors. So when we talk about something being thermal, we talk about it conducting heat. So thermal is always related to heat. If something is a conductor, it easily allows heat to pass through. So, this sort of metal, for example, that would easily allow heat to pass through. So, that is why saucepans and frying pans are made out of metal because we obviously want to heat the food up, don't we? Now, an insulator limits the amount of heat which is passed through. So it's not very good at letting heat through. So things such as wool and fabric, these are good insulators. And if you think about it, our clothes are made of fabric and wool, aren't they? And they keep us nice and warm. And you can also use the word conductor and insulator when you are talking about electricity. So let's see what you remember. So you can see that I have missed out some of the words here. On your piece of paper, have a go at writing down what the missing words are. Okay, so for this word here, that would have been translucent, which means just about see-through, doesn't it? Brittle is a lovely word that describes something which is hard but is easily broken. So that would be brittle. Absorbent is something like a sponge, which takes in a lot of water or liquid. And this one is a thermal conductor. It lets heat through easily, and this one would therefore be a plastic. The plastic over the wire would be an electrical insulator because it doesn't allow electricity to pass through very easily. Okay, let's have a look at these three cups, which are made out of different materials. We've got one which is made out of metal, one which is made out of glass, and one which is made out of plastic. And the question here is, which do you think is the odd one out? Now, there are many possible answers, but to help you think about this, you can begin to think about the properties of materials word bank that we have just looked at. So you might want to think, well, actually, they're all the same because they're all waterproof, aren't they? They all keep in water. Um, what else could we say about them? Well, are they all rigid? Do they all keep their shape? Are they all strong, for example? Are they all smooth? So have a think about those um, properties there and see about how you could think about which one is different. Maybe have a think about these three words here to help you. Do that now on your piece of paper. So you could have, as I suggested, have considered transparency to choose the odd one out. So for these ones, for the glass and the plastic, they are quite transparent, aren't they? But the metal one would be opaque. So perhaps that might have been the odd one out for you. So the properties of materials help us to decide which materials are suitable to make a particular object. So which important properties do all three cups need to have? So if you were to design a cup, what properties would you need your material to have? Could you make a cup out of fabric, for example? It wouldn't be very waterproof, would it? Well, depending on what the fabric that you chose. Would it be very strong? So think about the properties that you would need to have in order to have a cup which was suitable for holding water. Do that now on your piece of paper. So for me, if I was going to design a cup, I would need to make sure that it was rigid, that it kept its shape. So rigid, perhaps it would be waterproof. Perhaps it could also be hard, and also quite strong. You want a material which is fairly strong because you want it to hold its shape and you want it to last a while, don't you? Okay, your task now is to find 10 or 12 items made of various materials. So you're going to go on a scavenger hunt now around your house. And of course, you're going to ask your parents or whoever's at home with you if you can use the objects if they don't belong to you before you take them. So you could take things such as a bowl, obviously ask your parents' permission, books, glasses, cardboard, leather, whatever is reasonable for you to use. So you want things which are made of different materials. So your task now, pause the video and see if you can find 10 to 12 items made of various materials. And then once you've found those materials, you're then going to come back and you're going to see if you can organize them into different groups. So, for example, you might decide to organize your materials in things by their properties of being flexible, for example, and some which are slightly flexible and some which are rigid. So, your first task is to go and find 10 objects around your home, and then you are going to come back and organize them into different groups. Do that now. Okay, so if we just remind ourselves of the objects which are shown here, we've got china, wool, fabric, we've got a plastic Tupperware box, a book which is made of paper, we've got a wooden chopping board, a glass, metal, a spoon, metal, I've got aluminium foil there, a leather bag, cardboard and plastic. They've been organised into three groups and we've gone with the properties of being flexible. So this has been organised into one group. That's been organised as slightly flexible because although the egg box holds its shape, it does also have some flexibility because it's got a hinge on the lid, hasn't it? So the next thing you're going to do now is you're going to think about creating a carroll diagram to classify your materials by their properties. So in order to do a carroll diagram, you need to think about two properties in which you could compare it. So for example, here I have chosen rigid and opaque. So if I was to then go back to my objects that I have got here, I'm looking at the objects which are rigid. So this would be my china bowl, for example. So I would then put my china bowl in rigid, but because my china bowl is also opaque, I cannot see through it, I would have to put my china bowl in this box here. So if I go to the example, in my rigid box, I would put the metal spoon, the china bowl, and the wooden board because they have the two properties of being opaque and rigid. If I had the cardboard egg box, for example, let's go back to the cardboard egg box, which is here. That is not rigid, is it? Because we decided it was slightly flexible. It's not rigid, but I cannot see through it. It's not, it's opaque, isn't it? So then I would put my egg box in this box here because it's not rigid, but it is opaque. So your task now, year fives, is to, once you have organised your materials into three groups like this, you're then going to have a go at creating your own carroll diagram, and you're going to decide whether your materials are rigid or opaque, and you're going to use the example here, rigid, not rigid, opaque, not opaque. Use this example to organise your own materials that you have gathered on your hunt. So use this example, and I look forward to seeing your work.